Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Beck. I'm super excited for our session 2 of our virtual book tour. I'm the author of $1 Billion B2B eCommerce. And today we're going to be talking all about building a technology foundation for e-commerce. First, I want to thank our sponsors, particularly our platinum sponsor, Elastic Path, for sponsoring this session and bringing this content to you. So here, you can find out more about our book, B2B eCommerce, at the link here, $1BillionB2Becommerce.com. And I wrote this book really to arm B2B companies with a playbook for success in bringing digital transformation to their business. There's lots and lots of chapters in here and lots of content. Today, we're going to focus in just one area. The book is available on Amazon.com. So here's our series at a glance. All of the sessions will air at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Our first session, which was on leadership and alignment with Johnstone Supply, is now available on demand. Today, we're going to be talking about building an e-commerce foundation. We've got lots more coming too, and I encourage you to join me for the rest of the sessions. I have some fantastic speakers joining me, so super excited for that. Today's agenda. So today, we're talking about building an e-commerce technology foundation. In this chapter, I break down all of the steps necessary to find an e-commerce platform, but also the other elements that are important for you to engage in a digital transformation for your business. Today, we're going to go through in detail some of the concepts with Carl Daw from Keysight Technologies and John Bruno from Elastic Path. We're going to bring some of these to life with some war stories and other things that Carl's going to share. But first, I'm going to go through some context before we get into the discussion. Before I dive in on that, I just wanted to give you a little personal experience. I've been in this business for 20 years, and during that time, I've re-platformed or brought new product, e-commerce product to market probably 35 times, and I've learned a lot along the way, and a lot of that is what we're going to talk about today. So I'll relate some personal war stories as we go. So what are some of the prerequisites in technology before you get into selecting a platform? It's really about setting the objectives and the human elements before you get into the technology, because the technology really needs to serve the objectives and not the other way around. Oftentimes I find businesses make the mistake of just putting up technology for technology's sake. And these foundational elements really come first: leadership, objective definition, understanding your customers' needs, defining what you expect out of it with an ROI model, and then aligning the organization. There's a reason I have 8 chapters before we get to chapter 9 in the book, and a lot of those chapters talk about those concepts. When you have those things in place, it's then time to select the right solution for your business. One thing I've learned in doing this 36 times is it's important to take the time and do it right. If you do this process well, you'll have a platform you can live with for 10 years or more. And there's some elements of that I'll talk about in a second that are important to consider. The very first of those is putting the customer at the center. And you have some tools at your disposal today. You can do this. You can find out what their needs are. One is interviewing your sales and support team. They're the folks who are closest to your customer. They understand their needs. And not only that, they understand how they can better serve the customer with better digital tools. So step one is really to interview those teams, and then reach out to interview your customers. The most successful implementations I've been involved with over the years, what these companies have done is gone out and involved the customer from the very beginning and integrated that customer feedback into the process of finding the right technology solution. And one great way to do that is by forming a customer advisory board. These are people that are involved. They're customers of different types and sizes for your business. And they're folks that can help you formulate your requirements, but also even test the solution as you're bringing it to market. They may be your first adopters when you roll out the solution. So putting the customer at the center is critical. Requirements are also critical. So you think about, what does the system need to do? And they need to be founded on those customer needs and also your business objectives I just described. Requirements are one component. I'll get into some of the others in a moment. Here's some examples. And again, I can't provide all the detail in this session, but in the book, I have a lot of detail around these things. You need to, number one, make sure that you're bringing a customer experience that your customer expects almost consumer-like. We'll get into that with Carl a little bit later. Marketing features, website operations and content management, personalization and loyalty. Your customer expects you to speak to them in a personalized manner. Website checkout and cart. With a B2B implementation, you need to be able to address the way that your customers buy products from you, like buying on a purchase order, for example. Omnichannel support. This is a B2C term, but it applies to B2B. What does your sales team need in the field while they're meeting with customers, and how can you better support them with an e-commerce platform? Workflows that are unique to businesses, like purchase permission setting and other things. And there's a lot more here. It's all in the book, but this just kind of scratches the surface, and we'll talk about these things as we go through our session today. The other piece is use cases involving the organization and your customers. It's not just about a list of requirements. It's about how they're going to use the system. So how do you find a platform? Well, you don't want to just look at requirements. You need to also look at flexibility and other qualitative factors. There are dozens of e-commerce platforms. The good news about that is there are a lot of options. The bad news about that is there are a lot of options. So the point is that you need to take your time and really sort through this process carefully. Take a long list approach, look at the market holistically, and then narrow that longer list down based on things like unique functionalities you have in your business. How flexible and customized does your experience need to be? What's your budget range? What is the focus of the platform? What's the availability of resources to develop on the platform? Systems integrators and developers and other technical resources. How stable is the company? What's their product roadmap? And what's your technology environment, and how well does that fit with what they're bringing to you? And you want to look for common use cases. So how are your customers and internal stakeholders going to use this system, right? Again, keeping in mind the practicality of this. It's about objectives, not just a list of requirements. And then qualitative factors are equally, or in some cases, more important. This includes cultural fit, the flexibility of the system, the business model, and other factors. Look, I've done this many times. And when you break it down, ultimately what makes a decision is not a list of features for you. It's the qualitative things that are important. Can you future-proof the business using the solution? Because you don't know what's coming. You don't know the feature sets or the demands your customers will have 5 or 10 years from now. There are new touch points emerging all the time. Think about mobile 10 years ago. It wasn't even a thing. Today, it is a huge part of how people interact with you digitally. Internet of Things, embedding technology and commerce into the products at the edge. So we'll talk about that with Carl a little bit later. Visual and voice commerce, Alexa, and all kinds of other things that are coming down the pike. And your customers' needs, this is one certainty, they will continue to grow and evolve. And one of the things we'll talk about today is headless commerce. It's emerged as a compelling way to ensure that your business is flexible going forward. So with that, I want to just, you've met me. In addition to being an author of this book, I'm also the managing partner of a company called Enciba. We have a business specifically oriented towards B2B optimization for Amazon business. So we help companies run their Amazon programs and determine their strategy. So Carl, you want to say hello to us? I'm so thrilled you're here with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian and John, and pleased to be on the call today with you two industry leaders. Again, the e-commerce program manager for Keysight Technologies and focal point for the e-commerce program at Keysight.
Awesome, Carl. Thank you. Hey, John, you and I go way back. You want to say hello and give us a little of your background?
Yeah, it's great to see you both, albeit virtually this time around. But I'm Vice President of Product Management here at ElasticPath. That means that I'm responsible for setting the product strategy, how we get there, what our roadmap is, and ultimately how we execute to deliver against that. And prior to that, I actually spent the past 5 years at Forrester Research, where I led their B2B e-commerce research practice.
Yep, and that's where we first met, John. So that's awesome. I'm thrilled to have you on this as well. So, great. Well, Carl, to start us off, I mean, we would hope that everyone knows who Keysight is. There are a few people that don't. So I know we have a few slides here. I'd love for you to kind of walk through them and tell us about Keysight.
Yeah, and I'll do that in the context of this actual session because it provides a background context of the journey that Keysight has been on, for example, as well as some of the complexity and challenges that ultimately lead to that technology foundation selection. So Keysight itself is a relatively new company, but we're an 80-year-old company in reality. We're the original electronic measurement part of Hewlett-Packard going back to 1939. So I've got an 80-year-old heritage focused on the founding focus of Hewlett-Packard. And then we spun out of Hewlett-Packard to form Agilent, and then spun out to be a pure electronic measurement company with Keysight Technologies, and focused on the entire sort of electronic measurement value chain of R&D, design, test, manufacture, and the like. So with that 80-year-old heritage, as of today, as a pure measurement company, and if you can move to the next slide, John, we're about $4.3 billion in revenue. We have over 13,000 employees worldwide. We are the market leader. We're number one in the majority of markets that we play in. You know, our historical focus and what most people know us for has been on hardware-based instrumentation, you know, hardware products basically, and then obviously we're moving to solutions, software and services, and new business models associated with that. And obviously products will remain a core part of it, but customers are looking for not just a product, but a true end-to-end solution. For example, you know, wireless and 5G is a good example there, or automotive, and a huge focus for the company. That also ties in with some of our challenges from an e-commerce standpoint. We have a huge product depth. We have a huge product range and have a huge complexity just in one category. We have over 180 products that range from $500 to $200,000. So helping the customer choose and select and get to what I call product fit is key, and enabling to do that in an online fashion.
That's sorry, go ahead, Carl. Go ahead.
No, similarly, we've had a historical direct sales force. All right, traditionally we've had a direct sales force centric organization. We now have a broad channel portfolio where within an indirect channel that represents typically over 30% of Keysight's worldwide revenue. And then sort of lastly, given that we have an 80-year-old heritage, there's a huge amount of B2B organizational and process complexity and baggage. It's worked well for the past 80 years, and trying to marry that to a dynamic digital e-commerce strategy, you know, certainly has been some challenges, because it's worked for the past 80 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yes, you fit the profile of a lot of companies that, you know, are reading this book today and are trying to figure this whole thing out. So I appreciate you joining us, Carl. Let's go ahead and go over to our fireside chat without a fire. So, and sorry to interrupt you before, Carl. It was a great background. I really appreciate that. Tell us more about your role. I mean, how long have you been there? What is your role at Keysight?
I've been at Keysight for over 30 years. Again, a lot of my peers in Keysight have that heritage, shall we say, with Agilent and formerly Hewlett-Packard. In my current role, I am the e-commerce program manager, responsible for Keysight's e-commerce strategy and roadmap execution, as well as the overall adoption, and then also the realization of the business objectives associated with Keysight's e-commerce program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, what's changed and what's different, I guess, later on in the fireside conversation. As part of what a program manager does and drives relative to e-commerce, it really is a partnership and sort of focal point leading what is within Keysight a cross-functional program and initiative across both business functions, IT functions, whether it be the web, ERP, finance, tax, trade, logistics, bringing all the internal stakeholders together, executing to that plan, as well as working with external vendors like Elastic Path or their technology consulting partners, basically bringing all that together, running it as a program to deliver on those business objectives for the company.
And so you don't sleep.
No, we are always late, and we have more roadmap than we have the capability to deliver on. So yes.
No, it's a lot.
Always tough to keep you busy. I'm glad that that you can empathize with me on the roadmap side of things. Carl, you talked a lot about the pedigree, the history of Keysight, and it's a really interesting dichotomy. And quite literally, the organization is technology first and technology powered. But you also mentioned that from a sales standpoint, it's very sales and Salesforce centric. So I guess that being said, when you think about the things, whether they're internal or whether they're external factors, what kind of drove Keysight to the point or this inflection point where digital and excelling at digital is no longer a nice to have but a must to have?
Not a problem, and you're correct, John. Historically, Keysight as an HP was very much a direct sales-centric organization. The sales reps was the center of the universe from a customer, and that was a great thing to have in the 90s. The relationship management piece, but they also were the focal point, from a communication and a customer engagement standpoint. But with digital now, the customer is actually now in full control. They're deciding what and where to engage, how and where they want to be engaged, and obviously doing research not just on say Keysight.com, for example, but multiple internet properties, whether it's that YouTube influencer, for example, whether it's a test and measurement sort of magazine, for example, or working with their peers or others on forums, they're getting the input that they need. So they're doing that research across multiple touch points, and then obviously engaging our sales team or our channel partners much later, I guess, in the process. So Keysight and prior to Agilent and HP, we've always had a strong web presence, but that's been more of what I call a marketing catalog type of environment, a sort of a source of information for them to some degree. So the challenge for us really is to work out how to engage that customer digitally, support and complement and also influence the customer at their different interaction and inflection points. So actually when they're on or when they're ready to buy, we can help so influence and shape and provide the relevant information as part of that journey. We've also been doing some creative things. You can go online and look at things like Wave 2020, for example, where a combination of things we haven't done historically digitally, and basically be where the customer is, be where they are on YouTube, right? Offer, less about the product, but more educating the customer on some of the key measurement techniques and capability that our new instruments can provide, whether it be ebooks, white papers, and then creative things like digital giveaways, something we've never done before, all right? Daily sign-up sheets, weekly giveaways, live on YouTube, and getting creative like that. And then obviously, as now a true multi-channel organization, we've got to, work. Our sales rep continues to play a leadership role in certain accounts, but obviously, partnering and working with our indirect channel, rental and solution partners, and tying it back to e-commerce, where e-commerce is really viewed as a key part of our overall go-to-market channel strategy, and just another element of that overall channel mix.
Carl, you said some really, really key things there. You said, be where the customer is, and the customer's in charge. And I couldn't agree with you more. We've got actually some sessions about that coming up, so I may have to have you come back and talk more about that. But that's fantastic. But you guys weren't always in e-commerce. Tell us. You started at a place where many B2B companies are today, which is sales-driven, Salesforce-driven, traditional channels, driving the business. Tell us where and how you started with e-commerce. Give us some background on how that all evolved.
So over the years, we've had numerous e-commerce initiatives. some successful, others were not. They were all typically what I call department or sort of vertical function led. Maybe we need maybe you were led a department and you had some accessories. E-commerce was growing. You saw other companies out there having some success in e-commerce. You decided to go and sell your products online. Maybe on eBay, for example. Maybe maybe you decided to have your own, create your own storefront, etc. But it was very much department-led, vertical function-led. Some worked, some didn't. We've still got some of those around, like our Parts online store, our Remarket online store. There were a number of other experiments that just weren't set up for success, for example. So they're basically experiments, not well funded. We put them out there. Maybe the adoption wasn't there. There was some functionality, capability, or misalignment, like you said at the start, with what customer expectations were, and basically they closed out. We'll talk about ownership later on and what's different, but again, they were very much focused on what I call the web front end. If you go back many years, it was all about sort of the web and the front end. There was less a focus on, you'd say, some of the things that really differentiate or makes e-commerce successful in a B2B space. Things like the order, the fulfillment, the delivery. We now offer, for example, 2-day delivery for e-commerce, and believe that's a key differentiator for us, as well as making, giving what customers expect for an e-commerce sale. And so really much sort of a front-end web focus rather than a end-to-end focus.
And it really is about making the customer's job easier, right? I mean, things like fulfillment, and talk about all the different aspects of e-commerce. It's not just about an online transaction, but it's about what happens afterwards too, right? Yeah. So
again, a great web project, for example, had the world's best store checkout experience, this, that, and the other, but maybe some of the other elements of that end-to-end, that the overall end-to-end commerce deliverable for a customer weren't there with respect to the payment methodologies, the products that were offered, or the ability to fulfill and deliver it in a timeline that the customer expected for e-commerce.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's great, Carl. And so you mentioned in what you were just talking about that you guys went through several iterations. And oftentimes I'll find, that in some of the companies I actually have in the book, some of the case studies talk about, they tried and they failed, and they didn't necessarily, they didn't do it right. And so you said that we did it right. What changed? What things happened in the business, or what changed with leadership or the organization, so that this time you did it right? And I know you've had good success, and we'll talk about that. But maybe you can give us kind of the changes that led to that, getting to that outcome.
Yeah, and I think to answer that, also some of the earlier steps, the successes as well as the failures, help realize. We'll talk about that later on. About sort of we knew what we wanted to some degree from a capability standpoint, and so to be honest, those earlier failures and successes helped shape what we needed to do it right. And we'll talk about some of the process and policy changes and things like that. So where we are now today is that commerce is a true company-wide priority. It's not a department or a vertical, whatever. We have full executive support, sponsorship, and engagement. It is a company-wide priority. E-commerce was our executive had a recent investor day, for example, and e-commerce was a key element of that. That didn't happen years ago. E-commerce was a side little project. Hopefully we'll sell a few million, et cetera, et cetera. So now e-commerce is a core company strategy. And really, and it's also a key critical business enabler for Keysight, and I'll cover some of those elements in a second. As well as the other thing that's happened is our B2B customers have matured. For example, they're expecting to go online and in many cases, especially for the low-cost transactional end, there's no need to talk to a sales rep. They can make the decision themselves. They can check with their peers. They can go on YouTube, comparison sites, whatever. They know what they want. We want to give them the ability to basically come online and basically buy that product online with little engagement from Keysight if they choose to do so.
So Carl, that's, I mean, you talked about the strategic buying, you talked about the leadership change, the culture change, but even it felt like at the heart of that, and forgive me, I don't have my clicker with me, but I've heard the word customer pop up a lot, and for good reason. One of the things that I know you hear, Brian, you hear all the time, and I've heard a lot too in the B2B world, is businesses are increasingly looking to deliver a kind of quote unquote consumer-like experience for their B2B customers. Mm-hmm. You know, since you've talked a lot about the customer, can you talk a little bit about what the phrase consumer-like experiences means to you? And I guess more broadly, what that sentiment means in terms of what Keysight's looking to deliver for its customers.
Yeah, okay, thank you, John. And over the years, whether it's been e-commerce or in various web projects, similar to some of the best practices that John outlined relative to engaging the customer, you know, quantitative or qualitative customer research, you know, basically, you know, reviewing the actual designs and usability tests with customers are some of the typical areas that we've done. You know, traditionally our projects have been, you know, fairly large. We want to make sure that they're right. It's also a significant investment from the company. So that upfront investment in the customer research, the upfront investment in customer usability testing to make sure that the designs work, that we go live with something that's going to work for our customer and meet those customer expectations is key. So we resonate with the phrase customer-like experience as context for Keysight. As I mentioned at the start, our customer is the engineer. So it's a technical sale, right? We've got to provide them with the technical material. They're not buying a t-shirt. They're buying an expensive instrument, for example, that has specifications. They've got to make sure that it meets their particular measurement problem as a key part of that customer experience. With respect to the actual e-commerce and customer-like experience, a couple of things from a reference standpoint. One, we compared ourselves to sort of leading B2C, you know, experiences and sites, obviously realizing that we have a degree of complexity that some of those don't. So that's just baggage that we have. The other thing, the phrase that we used within the project team was frictionless. And that was sort of a mandate for every aspect of it. Every part of that design mandate was take the friction out. And the way of doing that was really truly focus what was the right thing for the customer. I can assure you there were some prior e-commerce implementations that were more Keysight-centric than customer-centric. They were very much focused on us, our process alignment, our policy, for example. We needed to authenticate you as a customer before you could even have even use our online store at that particular point in time. So the ability to take the friction out, we, you know, basically are allowing our customer to do a guest checkout. If they want to do a guest checkout, and we're allowing them to do that, guest or registered. We've simplified our product structure, so not burdening the customer with our complexity and our product structure complexity, giving them delivery choice, giving them free delivery. We've changed our policies where to ensure that the order flows. That helps Keysight from a automation standpoint, and so it's a Keysight benefit, but it's also a benefit from a customer experience standpoint because that order gets submitted, it automatically flows, get automatically acknowledged in minutes, for example. So a good example of a policy change that helps our customer as well as Keysight relative to that automation as such. A couple of other ads, again, based on those previous projects, and this also ties into some of the platform foundation activity, we wanted to offer an integrated customer experience. All right, we knew this right from the start. We didn't want a separate web marketing site experience and a separate store e-commerce experience. Again, our engineers are on our website. They're needing to see the back of the instrument, the specifications, the data sheet, all those things. So we wanted to integrate commerce directly into that same page experience and make it integrated. Didn't want to separate the two. So again, that ties into that frictionless, give the customer to the ability to buy where they're already at and already integrating with the website. We're not perfect. I can assure you, anybody who goes out on Keysight.com today, you'll still see that we have a long way to go. Again, gets back to that sort of wide and diverse product offering and the complexity, but we're looking at opportunities to improve the customer buying journey and to get them from basically awareness to research to selection to ultimately to product fit, and looking at ways to differentiate the experience, especially for those low-cost transactional products that we offer and are targeting for e-commerce today.
Hey, Carl, I thought you were perfect. We got to end this now. I'm kidding. It's a journey. We know. It's funny you mentioned, and I think you may have written this book actually. The book behind me here, but you talked about the importance of a consumer-like experience in some ways, and then also adopting B2B workflows. And that's actually the chapter 10. That's the one following this one. I talk about that, actually, stealing smart from B2C. So, but take us back to, so you had all these, you had these attempts that didn't work. You put up some implementations that didn't meet the customer's needs. They weren't getting adoption. How did you select? Tell us, you've done it right this time. You selected a platform. Take us through that process. How did you select a new platform? How did you get through it? I mean, that's a common question, and in some cases, it's an investment for these companies, both of time and dollars. So they want to do it carefully, right? Our listeners. Yeah. So tell us how you went through that process. What can you tell them about your experience?
So as it relates to e-commerce platform selection, just to sort of to pin that decision. The decision on, as it relates to e-commerce, was the key strategic decision that influenced that was basically a decision that we made to replace our 15-year-old legacy J2E website, and to basically replace that with a modern industry-leading web content management system. And to do that, we selected Adobe's Experience Manager platform, AEM. So that was really how we started. We knew our web platform was old. We knew we wanted to start, leveraging an industry platform and the capabilities that offered. So that's really what started the journey. And then basically the e-commerce decision basically moved on from there. What I've got to do, though, is provide some additional context because outside of the web and e-commerce space, there was a number of other projects that were going on. And at the time within Keysight, probably a negative perception of what I call historical, large, complex, boil the ocean projects that required major investment dollars, major decisions, took years, ran late, didn't deliver. As such. So we'd had a number of outside of this space, number of those decisions. So at the time, that was the framework that we entered the sort of the e-commerce selection in, as well as the Adobe AEM Web Content Management Platform. So we made a couple of strategic decisions early on at the start. The first, trying to avoid that boil the ocean, was to go best of breed. All right, so it allowed us the flexibility to pick and choose, get we weren't tied into one big monolithic platform. We could choose the best and then mix and match to align with what we wanted and weren't tied into one particular vendor footprint or whatever. So best of breed relative to web content management, best of breed as it relates to a product information management system, best of breed as it relates to an e-commerce platform. So that was
and Carl, you guys landed on Elastic Path. Tell us about that. I mean, John, you represent Elastic Path, so I'm sure you have some perspective here too. But tell us about how you got there and what kind of some stories along the way.
Great. So another strategic decision was really around the comment about just enough e-commerce. All right. So we looked at the sort of the footprint, part of your suggestion earlier along, and we looked at sort of all players, and came to the conclusion we didn't want that monolithic platform because we'd only probably use 25% of the capabilities, and so we coined the phrase just enough just enough commerce. So looking at both capability and price point. So we looked at all the players and then sort of resonated as it related to Elastic Path for a number of reasons. Firstly, the headless comment. I talked earlier on about the avoiding sort of duplication from having a web content management platform and a sort of a monolithic a separate storefront e-commerce platform, for example. We wanted that integrated customer experience, and we also wanted to avoid the duplication between web content management and a monolithic e-commerce platform and capability that we didn't want, didn't need, and then obviously have constant churn about what was going to get done where. So that was probably our, relative to the Elastic Path decision, sort of the number one thing that resonated with us, that integrated customer experience and the sort of the just enough e-commerce. Key things like the linkage and integration. Elastic Path works very well with Adobe AEM, so we saw that as a natural fit. And then obviously, Elastic Path's what I call their integration framework, realizing that they weren't center of the universe, that we were going to have to link into Salesforce, Siebel, Oracle ERP, and a various bunch of back-end technology ecosystems as befits a company with an 80-year-old heritage. That resonated with us as well. Also, it fit the just enough e-commerce mantra, and we knew we could start with Elastic Path, then build and grow with them, and it didn't come with some huge monolithic type price tag.
So yeah, as Elastic Path, of course, we consider ourselves a best-of-breed commerce platform, and we're headless, so everything is API first. Now, we don't want to tell our customers or mandate what kind of experience they need to build. But kind of going back to the selection process, right? It's really easy to look at the things that are right in front of you, the capabilities, the functionality, the experiences that you want to deliver right here, right now. But when you think back to your selection process, how did Keysight balance off the requirements of right now or the immediate needs versus kind of where you're seeing your products going, your technology going, and ultimately where you see your customers and their experiences wanting to go? How do you balance off the tangible things that you can see in the next 6 to 12 months versus what might arrive 3 to 5 years down the road with the same commerce platform?
Yeah, so a great question. Obviously, as part of the evaluation process, one thing as part of that evaluation process and the whole concept of having that integrated customer experience, we realized that with headless that it would actually support basically new business models for Keysight, that we could actually embed e-commerce. Obviously, our priority was to get the basic commerce capability out there and deployed. But as an example, right, Keysight today offers hardware-based instrumentation that has all the functionality built in. It has software switches that enables capability. A customer might want to make some other measurement capability. They can ring in today and basically place a purchase order and get that capability turned on. We also have an extensive software portfolio with different license types based on usage-based licensing or time-based licensing. So the vision for us, that the future capability is to embed commerce wherever the customer is. It ties into that customer-centric approach. If the customer's on K.com, great. They want to select, search, add a product to their cart, great. But the ability to embed e-commerce where the customer's at, whether it's in that instrument, for example, or embedding in that piece of software, their time-based license is going to run out, for example. Why step away from that software application? Why not basically do it directly from the piece of software, get the extension that you need, and basically transact online? I think it's a customer expectation. It also fits that new business model that Keysight is moving to.
So that's a great point, Carl. Thank you for sharing that. Oftentimes I'll get asked about ROI drivers, right, for e-commerce, and you guys have had some great success. And I'd love to learn more about, and maybe you could tell our audience about some of the successes you guys have had with commerce, with aligning channels, with all the things you've been talking about today.
Yeah, so some of this is Keysight confidential, of course, but some of the key drivers and objectives for Keysight were obviously revenue, incremental customer reach. Obviously, from a web e-commerce standpoint, opportunities to reach out to the territory, our geographic customers. Obviously, there's opportunities, and obviously a key part of that strategic initiative for Keysight is improving our overall gross margin. So, to just expand on a couple of those, we've seen exponential revenue growth since we've launched with what we call differentiated delivery, our 2-day delivery option. The typical the typical purchase process for Keysight is typically built to order, and that takes 4 to 5 weeks for a customer. So from a commerce standpoint, and only available on e-commerce, we're providing the ability for customers to come online and basically offer them a differentiated delivery, a 2-day delivery experience, and that's really driven that exponential revenue growth for e-commerce. We're also seeing fantastic results, better than we expected. It's a positive surprise for us with new customer reach. Okay, 60% of our customers today who are buying online are new customers that we've not seen before. Exceeded our expectations. They're not in our database. It's new customers that we've uncovered. We can then obviously tie them into our existing, capture them on e-commerce, and then tie them into our existing digital marketing programs, as well as our sales organization. We're also seeing great adoption. We offer both a mixture of credit card and PO to align with what our customer choice, give them the choice of whatever. We're seeing great adoption with credit card usage, at least over 70%. Obviously has great benefits for Keysight relative to reducing our day sales outstanding, for example, and again, significantly higher than what we thought originally.
That's awesome. So those are some really great metrics, and it's really interesting to see the impact already on some of the key business objectives that you've had. So when we think about selecting the right technology platform, the right e-commerce solution, it's quite easy to kind of default back to a standard RFP of kind of check boxes of features and functionality. But can you talk a little bit more about how you baked in some of the objectives and goals that Keysight had into the evaluation process? What you did kind of beyond the standard RFP when you made your selection?
Yeah, and also, so a couple of things. One, the getting clarity on, I guess, who are the key decision makers. It may sound odd, but getting clarity on who the actual decision makers are for that decision. There's a lot of people in the room, but getting clarity on who is making that decision. So great that you've got a set of requirements or capability, but again, not all of those are equal. There are different stakeholders with different expectations. So getting clarity on that. And then also for us, getting what I call cross-functional alignment on the business problem we're trying to solve, and establishing the clear criteria for how we're evaluating that particular platform. One, it ensures that it's consistent across the actual various vendors that we're actually looking at. For example, it also ensures that the relevant people making the decision on the path, also, as you've highlighted at the start, if it's the wrong decision, it can be fairly expensive relative to the project having to get reset, whatever. So for me, it's worthwhile putting that time in up front to make sure that, I guess, the quality of the analysis and the confidence in the decision. Another thing that we historically do and has been borne out is, as part of that selection process, for example, is we'll force a pilot or a proof of concept. All right, it validates what the vendor is telling us. It also gives us an opportunity to to engage the vendor, maybe not the sales team, for example, but their professional services organization, for example, or validates, or they may have some solution partners, for example. So it allows us to validate, and we get a tone and a flavor. Brian talked earlier on, for example, about the, some of the softer options, for example, but that's important. Understanding, what that vendor is interaction like. Are they going to be there for us in 6 months, 12 months? If they're the tone and the approach during the pilot or the POC really validates that this is a sale, we're going to be on our own, or this vendor's going to be with us as part of our journey, and so that's part of that evaluation process for us. Basically the pilot and the POC to sort of engage on some of those softer elements of the actual evaluation process.
So it sounds like Elastic Path's been a good partner for you, Carl, which is great. So, just kind of I asked this of all of our guests here in the virtual tour, and and I'd love to get your perspective on this. So if you had one, well, maybe two pieces of advice for a CEO who is just starting his or her journey down this path of digital transformation, what would that advice be?
As it relates to a CEO, and given some of the issues that, as a sort of legacy, B2B company with 80-year sort of background, for me, it ties into that management of change, the change management, whatever, and that's really around the advice will be driving sort of organization alignment, okay? And then also driving that alignment on the problem that you are trying to solve. I guarantee you every executive, every department or function's got their expectation of what they're looking for from that e-commerce project, all right? And that's going to be a casualty executing on a project where there's not that alignment across the company. And then there are going to be issues that are going to pop up, and having that clarity on what the priority, the focus is across the company is clear. We've also seen it, right? Of getting clarity on who owns e-commerce within the company. It seems rather sort of fundamental question, but I can assure you, over the years with us, that has not been clear. Yeah. I own this product line. It's my product line. I'm going to sell it online, whatever. And we end up with multiple competing storefronts, misaligned strategy, misaligned marketplace strategies. Just getting clarity on who owns e-commerce, who's accountable for it. Again, execution may be different. And then the last one I'll basically touch on, this gets back to the comment we made about sort of platform selection, whatever. Don't overbuy. One is obviously there's cost implications, there's implementation considerations, and then you're going to have a complexity nightmare, and then you're going to have sort of white paper strategy sessions just to work out which platform is doing what within the company to some degree. So we resonated with that just enough e-commerce phrase, and we think we did well relative to making that one of the key things that we considered.
Well, thanks for that, Carl. And John, thank you as well. I'm going to share a few things here on my screen just to take us through our just kind of closing remarks here. Thank you guys both. And Carl, your experience is just so on point. I swear you wrote this book, man. It's awesome. So let me go ahead and share my screen here, guys. So here's just a bit about, hang on one second. There we go. So here's our contact information. Carl and John, again, thank you very much. If you want to reach out to me, here's my information, and you can go to the book site here. I'll list it again to learn more about billion-dollar B2B e-commerce. And again, Chapter 9, we talk a lot about these concepts that we just shared. Don't miss our next session, Revenue Drivers and Return on Investment. I've got a company called Illumina. Sometimes called the smartest company on the planet. Pretty interesting. Give you guys a run for your money, Carl, I suppose. And that's going to be available June 24th. So everyone, thank you very much. Our emails, Meg from Elastic Path and Brian from Insiba, or You can email us if you have any questions or want to get in touch with us right down there at the bottom. Thanks again, and I hope to see you soon on session number 3 of the virtual book tour. Until then.